Before I preface this video, I want to say that Jujutsu Kaisen is probably my second favorite shonen series of all time. Its unique aesthetic, beautiful fight scenes, and absolutely stellar characters made it one of the highest quality written stories, not just in shonen, but in storytelling as a whole. That's why it makes me so disappointed to see it fall from grace in its writing quality. Let me explain. Jujutsu Kaisen is a story defined by the conventions of its genre. Its power system, world building, and general setting are all inspired by works of the past, and it is in the confines of the traditional shonen genre that Jujutsu Kaisen crafted its own unique aesthetic and amazing characterization for its world. And this can be seen no better than in the titular characters for the series. JJK is a story that lives and dies by its characters. The conflict that these people go through and the world that they inhabit, it all contributes to the refreshing and subversive storytelling that we've all come to love. And within that unforgettable cast of characters comes somebody so remarkable that he escapes the confines of his own story and becomes a symbol of the genre itself. The character I'm talking about, of course, is Satoru Gojo, the strongest Jujutsu sorcerer alive. This is probably the character people remember the most whenever they experience Jujutsu Kaisen. His overwhelming charisma and immense strength absolutely mesmerize all that watch him for the first time. Gojo Satoru wasn't just a strong character, he was the strongest character in the story. Nobody even came close to his power and strength. Well, nobody except for Sukuna. Sukuna vs. Gojo is a conflict that had been building up since the beginning of the series. Hell, I can argue it was the most anticipated fight of this story, as we get to see two of the strongest characters, the juggernauts of the series, finally determine once and for all who gets the title of the Honored One. And as we watch the events unfold in the series, the question of who was truly the strongest character in Jujutsu Kaisen was always put into our heads, as we see awakenings to body transfers, hidden techniques to point 2 domain expansions. Everything was on the table, and we could never truly get an answer until the fight happened. Sukuna, now residing in Megami's tormented body, fully unlocking the true potential of the Ten Shadows, wreaks havoc in the Culling Games. His strength unmatched by any and all contestants that dare step beneath him, and an absolutely busted curse technique that allows him to adapt to any and all phenomenon. This fight was looking dire from the get-go. We all knew what the story demanded and what had to happen, and yet, it all feels so unsatisfactory. Let me stop titter-tattering and get to the main point. Why is Gojo dead? Or rather, the question I seek to answer this video. Was Gojo's death bad writing? Well, to even answer this question, I kinda have to go way back to where the problems with Jujutsu Kaisen's writing started to show themselves and sneak peek us to the disappointment that we would see in the future. What do I mean by this? Well, let's take it back to the basics. What even is good storytelling? If I had to simplify that ginormous question into a single answer, it would simply be good cause and effect. Or to speak more accurately, good setup and payoff. Some of the most iconic and personal favorite moments in storytelling, whether it be movies, TV shows, or anime, happen because the author asked a very simple question early on in his story and answered it in a satisfactory way later down the line. And if it's one thing that I personally would say shonen stories do right, it's paying off setups done early on in the story extremely well. Think of any iconic moment from your favorite series and ask yourself, why is this moment so satisfying to watch? It's probably because you had a satisfactory conclusion to a story beat that you emotionally invested yourself into at an earlier point in the story. And if I had to say one thing, Jujutsu Kaisen was excellent at doing this. Megami's domain expansion, built up since the concept was introduced into the story. Mahito vs. Yuji Round 2, built up since their initial fight and their clash of ideologies. And even the legendary Enchain moment was built up basically since the beginning of the story. All of these defining moments of the series had excellent setups and brilliant payoffs that made the story more engaging to watch. and the Shibuya Incident arc as a whole, touted as the best arc in the entire series, possibly one of the best arcs in shonen history, it would not be as great as it is if not for the immense setup that had been going on from Chapter 0 all the way to Chapter 78. And I don't even have to convince you of all the amazing payoffs that we get in this arc that makes it such a masterpiece. So I get back to the main point. What makes Gojo's death so incredibly unsatisfying in my and many other people's eyes? Well, to be frank, it's because it's lame. Seriously though, if you think of all the build-up, all the setup that we've been doing to this fight, how Gojo said he would definitely win in a fight if they were to ever clash, seriously brings into question how satisfying of an ending this truly is for the character. And to be honest, I'm sorry to say guys, we really should have seen this coming. The early signs of JJK's drop in writing quality can be seen as early as in chapter 147 with Principal Yaga's death. This was the first time I began to question the writing decisions of Gege Akutami. I mean, Principal Yaga had been a semi-hyped character with his cursed corpse technique, able to create an army of sentient beings that can all fight on their own. Imagine like Geto's curse technique, only the beings are intricately crafted to become more intelligent, strong, and resilient over time. He could have surely become the next special grade sorcerer with enough time and planning. I sure was hoping to see him in Shibuya, but he just dies unceremoniously. One of the weaker characters in the series as well, Principal Gakuganji. And while Panda has this really emotional scene with him essentially crying over his father's death, we never see him talk about or mention Yaga again. Wasted potential. Or how about Nobara Kugasaki, one of the most popular characters up until her death, touted as one of the best written female shonen characters, brilliantly subverting the trope of the useless female heroine in her own right. And while she does get a pretty emotional death scene, she was killed off before we even got to see her full potential. I'm not going to even try to guess how Gege could implement her into the story right now, as any attempt in my eyes would just be really forced and contrived. Or how about the most infamous example of what I'm talking about? Yuki Tsukumo, a true special grade in her own right, the peak of sorcery that Yuji and all the other characters aspire to become. She gets one fight scene that she's not even in for half the time, and gets jobbered by a main antagonist that didn't even seem like he was trying. Her final death wasn't even that satisfying, as the black hole she conjured only ripped off his shirt. Let me just put this in perspective. If a main character got hit with the black hole and only lost a shirt in the process, people will be screaming how badly written that scene was and how much plot armor the character had. And there are many other slip-ups that Jujutsu Kaisen has in its writing that don't immediately ruin the enjoyment of the series, but that started to build up and reach a point where it was starting to become a problem. The most infamous example that I could think of was, of course, the extremely fast pacing after the Maki vs. Naoya fight. After the conclusion to that fight, which in and of itself had some very questionable writing decisions, we get from chapter 119 to 221 the following events. All of that happens in the course of just 22 chapters. To put that into perspective, from the time the Shibuya arc incident starts to 22 chapters in, we're only getting to the beginning of Yuji vs. Choso. Series-defining moments, anticipated payoffs that honestly could have featured entire arcs in their own right, get finished in the in-story amount of time it would have taken a person to go on a weekend field trip. And it's this insanely fast pacing that I think the reason why Sukuna vs. Gojo isn't nearly as hype as it should have been. I mean, we're talking about the most anticipated characters going at it since basically the series beginning, and the amount of hype we could muster is just memes? Not to discredit the amazing fight choreography and absolutely hilarious moments that take place during this entire fight, but I know for me and for everyone who watched it, there was something hollow, like something was missing during this entire fight. almost as if this entire thing wasn't really getting the respect it deserved. And while we could all kind of swallow it for the time being, as we were getting what we wanted technically, Sukuna versus Gojo, I could no longer swallow the result of this conflict as it comes into its ending chapters. First off, I just want to say, the inner monologue that Gojo has this chapter is genuinely gut-wrenching and makes his character far more deep and compelling. The way that he has to come to terms with his mortality and espousing the same beliefs touted at the very beginning of the series genuinely brought a tear to my eye. It speaks truly to a far more compelling character death that the story, sadly in my opinion, does not justify having. If you strip back all of the grandeur, all of the spectacle, all of the chaos, and just look purely at what Gojo Satoru has done for the world of Jujutsu Kaisen and what his death means, it's frighteningly hollow. Gojo's entire life at this point has only been defined by his failure as the strongest sorcerer alive. He couldn't save Amanai in the Hidden Inventory arc. He failed to notice his best friend Geto's downward spiral that would lead him to commit the Night Parade of 100 Demons, an absolutely heinous act. He failed to save his student Yuji from the obvious assassination attempts by the Jujutsu sorcery world. He failed to kill those curses in the Shibuya arc, which led to the many tragic deaths of all the innocent people. But for all of us, his most sad and tragic failure was him losing at the hands of Ryomen Sukuna, a Sukuna who stole the body of his star pupil and used it for his own dastardly deeds. A Sukuna who's wreaked so much havoc and trauma over his students that he barely had the time to help reach their full potential. A Sukuna that now, thanks to him, inadvertently has become the strongest he's ever been and will probably wreak more havoc on the world. A Ryomen Sukuna that, in his own words, he barely got to make him go all out. Gojo Satoru's death is so disappointing because it betrays the promises his character set forth at the beginning of the story. For all that bloviating and bluster, Gojo's life as a Jujutsu sorcerer didn't really amount to that much. Ultimately, all he ended up doing was leaving his students with potentially the strongest curse that has ever lived. And the conclusion to one of the most anticipated fights in shonen history amounted to what's essentially an ass pull in the villain's favor, and a completely ruined character who has a legacy of nothing but failure on the writer's behalf. Gege Akutami and his subversive writing style accidentally committed one of the worst subversions ever, and that was writing a death scene as unsatisfying and unbefitting of someone called the strongest.